When someone avoids you, the pain isn't the distance. It's the quiet feeling that you were easy to leave. No argument, no explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. And your mind goes to the same place it always does. What did I do wrong? Did I matter less than I thought? Was I too much? Or somehow not enough? If you've lived long enough, you know this pain is not new. It doesn't come from this one person. It comes from every time connection disappeared without giving you something solid to grieve. Because rejection hurts, but at least it has shape. Avoidance does not. It leaves you suspended between memory and doubt. And if you're older, if you've already lost people, if you already know time doesn't promise second chances, this silence doesn't just hurt. It reopens an old question about your worth. Tonight, this is not a video about blaming anyone. It's a quiet conversation about what avoidance really means, why it cuts so deeply later in life, and why being avoided is not the same as being unworthy. If someone has been avoiding you and you've been carrying that question alone, stay with me. You're not here by accident. 1. The question you never say out loud. When someone avoids you, you don't rush to confront them. You don't demand answers. You don't ask what changed. Instead, you turn inward. You replay small moments that once felt ordinary. A look, a tone, a message you sent without thinking, and a question forms. Quietly. Was I too much? Not too loud, not too needy, but too present, too emotionally available, too willing to care. This question doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from experience, from having lived long enough to know that connection doesn't always end with honesty. Sometimes it simply disappears, and the nervous system cannot rest without clarity. Silence keeps it alert. So avoidance doesn't just feel like distance. It creates doubt. You begin to wonder if this has happened before, if it's a pattern, if this means you were easy to leave. And without realizing it, you begin to adjust yourself. You speak less. You share less. You hold back. Not because you want to, but because your heart is trying to prevent this kind of confusion from happening again. And this is where many people slowly disappear from themselves, without ever realizing it. 2. Why avoidance hurts more than rejection. Rejection hurts, but it has shape. It has words. It has a moment you can point to. It gives your heart something solid to grieve. Avoidance does not. Avoidance leaves you suspended, and this is what makes it so painful. When someone rejects you, the mind can begin to close the chapter. But when someone avoids you, the chapter never ends. Your heart keeps turning pages, looking for a sentence that explains what happened. And here's what most people don't understand. The human nervous system cannot rest without clarity. Silence keeps it alert, so your body stays slightly tense. Your thoughts circle back. Your emotions never fully settle. And this is where the pain deepens. Because avoidance doesn't just say, "I don't choose you." It quietly suggests something far more unsettling. That you are not important enough to deserve an explanation. Even if that isn't true, that is how it lands. Especially later in life when you've already experienced loss, already learned that some goodbyes never come. Avoidance doesn't feel like one person stepping away. It feels like being erased without being acknowledged. And your heart asks a quiet, dangerous question. If I mattered, would they have said something? This is why avoidance hurts more than rejection. Not because you were left, but because you were left uncertain. And uncertainty teaches the heart to doubt itself. In the next section, we need to talk about what avoidance actually means emotionally, and why it so often has very little to do with you. 3. What avoidance really means emotionally. When someone avoids you, it's natural to assume they don't care. But here is the part that is hardest to accept and most freeing to understand. Avoidance is rarely about indifference. It is usually about overwhelm. When emotions rise beyond what a person knows how to handle, the nervous system looks for escape. Not because the feeling is unimportant, but because it is too important. And here's what most people never realize. Some people were never taught how to stay present with discomfort. They learned how to distract, how to deflect, how to disappear. So when connection asks something of them, honesty, vulnerability, emotional responsibility, their body reacts before their mind does. They pull back. Not as a decision, but as a reflex. This doesn't mean they didn't feel something with you. Often, it means they felt too much, without the tools to stay. And this is where the pain becomes personal for you. Because when someone avoids you, it feels like a judgment of your worth. But emotionally, it is often a sign of their capacity, not your value. Here is the quiet truth. People who are comfortable with closeness do not avoid it. People who are unfamiliar with emotional presence often retreat from it. And if you are someone who shows up sincerely, who listens, who stays, you may unknowingly highlight what another person cannot yet face. In the next part, we need to talk about why this dynamic cuts even deeper later in life, and why time changes how avoidance is felt. 4. Why avoidance cuts deeper later in life. There is a reason avoidance feels heavier as you get older. It's not because you've become more sensitive, it's because time feels different now. When you were younger, distance felt temporary. There was always the idea of later. Another conversation, another chance to explain, another opportunity to reconnect. But later in life, you know something deeply. Later is not guaranteed. You've already lost people, not just to death, but to time, to change, to quiet, drifting apart. So when someone avoids you now, it doesn't feel like a misunderstanding. It feels final. And here is the part that cuts the deepest. Avoidance in later life doesn't just remove a person. It removes a sense of belonging. It makes you question whether you were truly part of something or just passing through. Because at this stage of life, connection is no longer casual. You don't open easily. You don't invite people into your inner world lightly. So when someone steps away without explanation, your heart doesn't just grieve the person. It grieves the courage it took to open it all. And that grief is quiet. It doesn't ask for attention. It settles into the body and makes everything feel heavier. This is why avoidance feels so personal now. Not because you need more, but because you have less time to waste on uncertainty. In the next section, we need to talk about a thought many people carry alone at this age. A thought that shapes how deeply avoidance wounds the heart. 5. I was easy to leave. There is a thought many people carry and almost never say out loud. It comes quietly, usually at night, usually after someone has pulled away. The thought is this: I was easy to leave. Not because you believe it fully, but because silence makes room for it. When someone avoids you without explanation, your mind doesn't just wonder why. It wonders what that says about you. You start thinking back to other moments, other people, other endings that never had closure. And suddenly, this thought feels familiar. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. And here's what makes this thought so powerful and so dangerous. It doesn't accuse anyone else. It turns inward. It makes you question whether your presence mattered as much as you believed, whether your kindness was noticed, whether your effort left a mark, especially later in life, when you've already learned that people can disappear even after years of closeness. So this thought doesn't feel irrational. It feels earned. But here is the truth that rarely gets said gently. Being easy to leave does not mean you were easy to replace. It often means you were willing to stay. And staying, emotionally, sincerely, without games, is something many people don't know how to do. They leave quietly because leaving requires less courage than being seen. In the next section, we need to talk about what healing actually looks like here, and why it doesn't begin with hardening your heart. 6. What healing actually looks like here. When someone avoids you, Healing does not begin with understanding them. It begins with releasing what you've been doing to yourself. Many people think healing means becoming less emotional, less open, less available. But that isn't healing. That's self-protection turning into self-erasure. And here is the quiet truth. Healing does not ask you to harden your heart. It asks you to stop punishing yourself for someone else's inability to stay. This is where many people get lost. They believe the pain will stop if they become easier to leave. Quieter, lower need, more distant. But what actually happens is that they slowly disappear from themselves. And this is not what healing looks like. Healing looks like allowing the pain without turning it into a verdict about your worth. It looks like saying, I don't need to understand everything to remain whole. It looks like giving your heart permission to stay open, but not unprotected. There is a difference. You don't need to chase clarity from someone who chose silence. You don't need to shrink to make their absence make sense. Sometimes, healing is simply this. You stop asking yourself to become someone else just to be kept. And in the next section, we'll talk about how to remain emotionally open without breaking yourself, especially after being hurt this way. 7. How to stay open without breaking yourself. After someone avoids you, the instinct is often to close. Not all at once, just a little. You stop reaching out. You stop sharing as much. You stop letting people see what moves you. You tell yourself it's wisdom, protection, maturity. But here's the part many people don't notice. Closing doesn't just keep pain out, it keeps connection out too. And healing is not about choosing between the two. Healing is learning how to stay open without placing your heart in spaces that cannot hold it. This is where gentle boundaries come in. Not walls, not silence, not disappearing. Boundaries that sound like this. I don't need to explain myself to people who choose not to listen. I can care without chasing. I can stay emotionally honest without offering unlimited access. These boundaries don't harden you. They steady you. They allow you to remain yourself without continuously reopening the same wound. Especially later in life, this balance matters. You don't have the energy to rebuild yourself after every emotional loss. So staying open now means being selective with where you place your heart. Not because you are afraid, but because you finally respect yourself. And this is the quiet shift that changes everything. In the final part, we'll bring all of this together into one truth. A sentence you can carry with you long after this video ends. A sentence to carry with you. If someone avoided you and you stayed until the end of this video, I want you to pause for a moment. Not to think, not to analyze, just to breathe. Because what you've been carrying was never meant to be carried alone. Being avoided does not mean you were unimportant. It means you were present in a way someone else could not meet. You did not ask for too much. You did not feel too deeply. You did not stay too open. You simply showed up honestly. And that has always mattered, even when it wasn't acknowledged. If there is one sentence I hope you take with you tonight, let it be this. They stepped away because they couldn't stay, not because I wasn't worth staying for. You don't need to harden your heart to survive this. You don't need to shrink to make sense of someone else's silence. You only need to stay connected to yourself. If this conversation felt like someone finally put words to something you've been holding quietly, you're not alone here. You can rest in this space. And if you feel called to, you're welcome to stay with us. To listen, to reflect, to heal gently, one quiet conversation at a time. Until then, be kind to your heart. It has already done enough.